Good afternoon, everyone. The time is now 2:21, and I call to order the meeting of the Orange County Sewer District Number 1 Advisory Board. A copy of the agenda for this meeting may be found on the county website under the tab for the legislature. Please silence your phones and electronic devices, and at this time, I ask you to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Kelly, can you do the roll call?
Yes. Emo. Benelli. Present. Genie.
Here.
Ellers.
Here.
Hotel. Here. Tui.
Here.
Five present, one absent.
Okay, we have our quorum, and first up on our agenda today, I'd like to call up Rick Golden, County Attorney, Joe Mahoney, Esquire, Senior Assistant County Attorney, Eric Deneng, Commissioner of Public Works, Bob Gray, Deputy Commissioner of EF&S, and Mary Beth Bianconi, Partner with Delaware Engineering.
Yeah.
Break up the signs.
Okay, first up, we have the item A, finalized DEIS. And after much discussion and analysis, we're at a milestone here. And Mary Beth, if you want to just lead us into as we would like to make DEIS designated as acceptable for public publication and to refer to the Physical Services Committee.
I see. Yeah. Hold back.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is very exciting. Sure. As the chairman says, after a lot of effort, we're finally at a milestone. The document that I just handed out has our little track and timeline on the top of it. There's one amendment to this timeline, which is our sewer committee was originally supposed to be on January 16th, last week, but we had snow, so it has been moved to today, as we know. The rest of this timeline remains as we had previously discussed. Our action items were to respond to the comments from staff, which we did, and we provided a markup copy to staff for their review. We also did some pretty significant modifications to the no action alternative and the unavoidable impacts sections, which you have copies of attached here because they were some fairly substantial changes. And then the responsiveness summary that we had previously provided has remained unchanged. And that responsiveness study summary, again, was for the use of this committee to be able to compare the DEIS as prepared to the scoping that was conducted a couple of years ago. Just for everyone to remember, scoping is an annotated table of contents. It tells us what to study and how to study it. So the rest of the discussion here, and I'll just really quickly walk through the changes, but was that if this committee, my understanding is if this committee were to determine that the DEIS is responsive to the scope and should be recommended to fiscal services being ready for public review, that would be the action for today. Also, all of the documentation, including the many thousand-page environmental impact statement that has been made available for all of the legislators to review in advance of today's meetings. So really quickly, the changes that we made to unavoidable impacts and to the no action alternative are attached. For unavoidable impacts, we went back to the scoping document and looked very carefully at what was identified as unavoidable impacts during scoping. Clearly, this is a construction project, so there are impacts associated with construction. Those include things like disruptions to traffic, stock management, stormwater, noise, dust, those types of measures. So there's a discussion about those unavoidable, unavoidable impacts of construction and what can be done to mitigate those. We also discussed the unavoidable increase in impervious surfaces because we are reconfiguring the wastewater treatment plant for current expansion and longevity improvement, and then queuing it up for potential future expansions. We will be increasing the impervious surfaces on the site of the wastewater treatment plant. So we discussed that. There will be increased maintenance demands for the wastewater treatment plant. We are building a more sophisticated treatment plant to respond to regulatory requirements. And the treatment plant is going to be designed to treat increased flows. So there will be additional maintenance demands. That's a natural connection to improving and increasing the capacity of the plant. There will be an unavoidable increase in power consumption. While we will use all of the efficiency that we can in terms of energy efficient pumps and variable speed drives and those types of things, simply treating water better, even if we're treating the same quantity of water, we're removing more constituents. There's a power consumption associated with that. And then of course, treating more water in response to demands for more capacity will drive power consumption. But we are doing everything we can to make it as efficient as possible. Another similar result to the project will be an unavoidable increase in the generation of residuals. Folks will recall when we treat wastewater, we're separating essentially water from all of the things that are in it. While the biological process consumes a lot of the organic material that's in the wastewater, we do end up with biosolids or residuals. And because we are increasing treatment efficiency, again, we're going to be removing more things from the wastewater and increasing capacity, we will be generating more residuals. The project does include elements that are intended to make that process as efficient as it can be, but it is a natural extension of better treatment and treatment of additional capacity. And then, again, another section that is sort of a natural extension of this is there's an unavoidable increase in user costs. While the county will be seeking all of the grant funding and low cost financing that is available from the state and federal government, it's very unlikely that the project would be fully funded by grants. So the users will fund the portion of the project that's not provided for in grant funding, as is currently the case when the county takes on debt for the sewer project. So those are the unavoidable impacts that were identified and described in more detail in the EIS. And then the other section that we did make some changes to, and this was in response to comments from the county attorney's office, was the no action alternative. And the concept here was to not simply state that doing nothing is not, going to be acceptable for a variety of reasons, but also to provide enough information so that there can be a comparison between doing nothing and the proposed project. So we addressed a number of different sections here with respect to how the no action alternative is not responsive to the needs of the community. One of them is regulatory requirements. As you all will recall, a new speedies permit was issued for the Heron wastewater treatment plant in 2020. In addition to total dissolved solids and chloride, which we've spent a tremendous amount of time talking about, there are other regulatory requirements that are embedded within that speedies permit that must be met. So the no action alternative does not address those regulatory requirements. So that's an important comparison to make. Another no action alternative would be, maintaining the existing wastewater treatment plant. And as you know, we've talked about the fact that many of the elements of the treatment plant, while it was built over time, are bordering on 40 years old, 50 years old, and they do have an operational life. A lot of them are mechanical. And so anything that's mechanical wears, becomes less efficient. And so in this, we looked at what we call the run to fail operation, which is, doing nothing would result in simply letting the treatment plant continue to decline in its ability to treat water simply due to the aging out of equipment. So as you remember, we have built-in longevity improvements to the plant. We have those actually designed as a component of the upgrade and expansion. And we also have them designed as a separate standalone action if that were something that the county wished to conduct. And so we actually do have in the facility plan, it's option 5, which is sort of the antidote to the no action alternative as it relates to that aging infrastructure. Additionally, you've called that we created a fairly elaborate hydraulic model that evaluated getting the wastewater from the communities that are served to the Harriman wastewater treatment plant. And in doing so, we used a lot of data to evaluate how water travels through that network of pipes. And we determined that while that network of pipes has served the communities extremely well for the last 40 plus years, we're at a point where sections of that system do need to be upgraded to meet hydraulic requirements, to be able to pass the water that is collected through safely to the wastewater treatment plant. So there's a couple of things here. One is the recommendations to improve the lower interceptor as an initial phase, and the future phases to deal with other interceptor sewers in OCSD1. And in addition to that, at the actual wastewater treatment plant, for those of you who joined us on the very nice sidewalk we did, all of the water comes into something at the plant called the headworks. And the headworks needs to be upgraded to accommodate the flows even today, as well as projected out into the future. So the no action alternative doesn't include in expanding the capacity of the collection system, and it doesn't include expanding the capacity, the hydraulic capacity of the treatment plant, both of which are really needed based on current conditions. And then really the last aspect of the no action alternative that we evaluated was there is currently a documented and well understood demand for additional capacity in the service area. And the no action alternative does not respond to that demand. And as I believe our attorneys will tell us, when we have a sewer district, for the properties that are within the sewer district, there's an obligation to provide collection and treatment of the wastewater. So doing nothing would not respond to that demand for additional capacity. So those are really the major changes that were made to the EIS from the last time you saw it. We also addressed all of the other comments, which included some changes to language and consistency, those kinds of things. But these were really the substantive changes to the EIS. I don't know if anyone had the time to download sections of it. I know Joe mentioned to me that he had reviewed the EIS, but on the web, pretty easy to go pick out the pieces that you'd like to see. Eventually, when we get to a point where the legislature adopts the EIS as a complete document and ready for public and agency review, the seeker regulations require that we have a presence online so that people can easily access the information. Right now, the information is hosted on our website, but we've coordinated with Eric so that the information can be hosted on the county's website for broad public review when we get to that point.
I'll go to that particular thing. First of all, this is one of the best no action responses I've ever seen in DEIS. So I commend Mary Beth and her team for that. When the legislature, let me get through fiscal services and then the legislature votes on it, they will, to say that it's complete to the extent of able to go out for government and public review, there's really a formal notice of completion that has to be passed. And it has certain, specific requirements in it, and it should also include, where we're doing this as a notice of hearing as part of that notice of completion. And I'll ask Mary Beth to go ahead and prepare that. And that should really be what the resolution of the legislature will be, and the Fiscal Services Committee is adopting that notice of completion, notice of hearing so they then can proceed to the next step. That's really the action they're taking. And the notice is simply the notice that's required by the state regulations when you're doing that, and that will have to be filed with the DPC. One of the things that the notice of completion requires is the designation of the places in which the DEIS, in addition to the website, where the DEIS is going to be available for public review. So I think that that might be, along with everything else you want to discuss, one of the things that you should discuss now, which we'll discuss again at fiscal services, so that Mary Beth can put those locations and prepare those DEIS drafts to put there at those locations that you believe would be good for the people to have access to, such as libraries and things like that.
I was gonna just say, to make it, to actually have a hard copy where someone can go and view it. And are libraries acceptable and?
Yes, very much.
What other examples
typical
are
place.
acceptable?
Sometimes they do school districts,
Okay.
but a lot of times that has to do with projects that have a huge impact, direct impact on school districts, such as like very large subdivisions or something like that. That might be a good place to do it. I don't think it's necessary here. I think libraries would be good places, governmental offices. Now, if you talk about governmental offices, 43 or 44 copies right off the bat.
Well, I don't know that we have to extend it beyond the district,
That's a good point.
That was one I was
So we could do it every town and village.
involved.
You don't have any cities, any town or village in the district. And then the libraries in the district.
The other nice thing about the libraries is we give them a physical copy, but then we also give them a thumb drive, and most of the libraries have public access computers. So if someone at home either has terrible internet access because it's hard to access the files online, or, they want to be able to they can use a public library computer to either access it on the internet or to just simply plug in a thumb drive and it's right there and they can look at it pretty easily. So we usually, for the libraries, we would provide both a physical copy and a thumb drive.
And that would, and also with the link that you provided. And thank you, Rick, for working the mechanics of that with us. That was huge help, and really, really appreciate your time that you put into it, because I know that took a while to get everything worked out.
Yep, everything's done now.
And it works, and it's great.
You guys have great, my IT person was very impressed with your IT person.
Good, good,
I don't,
He's a new IT
I don't know
person
how
for
they-
us. We're very excited about it too.
Rick and I were on some emails where I'm confident, I was reading it going, I have no idea what they're talking about, but it seems like it's a good thing.
And it's been distributed to all legislators now. And would it be after February 1st, after the full legislature, provided that we go through physical today and it moves on to the legislature? Is that at the time when you would make that link available
To the public,
and put it
yes.
on the county website?
Yes.
Okay.
It's actually not appropriate to do it until the legislature actually says it is ready to have the public and government agencies look at it. And we'll also submit it to other agencies as well.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
Go to all the involved agencies.
Okay.
Yes, just for clarification, in reference to where it would be distributed, you said sewer district. Am I to assume that sewer district also includes the community?
No, but we should do it in
Yeah, definitely, yeah, okay, so,
We would sort of consider the service area.
Right.
the certain, okay, let's change the terminology,
Yeah.
service area.
Yes,
That
Lori?
was part of my question, thank you. The other part is you were saying that we can provide it to libraries on a thumb drive. Would it be more cost effective just to provide it on a thumb drive, or are we legally bound to have a physical copy
You're
too?
not legally bound to have it, but in my experience, there is a certain percentage of the population that wants a hard copy to look at for DEISs. So I would strongly suggest that we have it physically located at each of the libraries and town and village halls.
You know, if you're the town and village
services.
hall, we definitely need physical because they don't have a public access computer usually, but.
But also, some people just don't like to look at anything online. They just feel it's better if they have a hard copy. That's my experience.
And what we'll do, because as you know, it's extremely voluminous, so what we'll do when we make the physical copies is we generally will we do them in 3-ring binders to make it a little easier for people to kind of manage. We'll have we'll probably provide each location with several executive summaries because it's not a long document and then more than one person could look at it at a time. They're very brief, but we'll usually divide it up so there's volumes of books. So if someone doesn't want to look at, tons and tons of, like, we have all of the data from when we sampled 836 or whatever it was,
Yeah.
wells, we'll put that in its own binder. If somebody wants to look at that information, it's available to them, they can look at it, but they don't have to page through that to find the one piece of information that they want about greenhouse gases or some other
Right,
topic
right.
that they're interested in. So we'll try to make it digestible.
And then also
No,
this will be there too.
Thank you.
So
There.
we can include that. It was really for this committee, since you guys are doing the work of sort of evaluating the responsiveness, but if
Typically, it's not.
It's not, okay.
Yeah, if you want to, it can be done, but typically that was things like that, and it's not usually done anyway, so this was very helpful, but that allows the decision makers, you, physical services, the full legislature, the ability to quickly determine whether or not it was responsive to the scope, which is really the determination that you have.
Okay,
it was very helpful.
all right. Any other questions?
The date we should discuss.
Yes, we
Public
should
hearing.
talk about dates.
Okay,
So for.
it has to be 30 days within, 30 days after the legislative session.
So it's this, there's no requirement for a public hearing. But every municipality that deals with any DEIS of any substance wants a public hearing. So I think you should definitely have a public hearing. There needs to be at least 30 days of review, including the public hearing. And usually DEISs have at least a 10-day requirement after the public hearing to receive additional comments. This is very typical. So what I suggest, you want to give some time for people to access it and review it. So you don't want to have a public hearing 2 weeks after you approve it. So I would suggest that approximately 30 days or between 30 and 45 days that you go ahead and you set a public hearing. So it would be the, say, middle of March to end of March, you would have a public hearing. And then there would normally be allowed public comment usually within 10 days after that public hearing.
Okay.
I think that's required, actually, 10 days.
The 10 days after hearing. The other thing I think we should discuss is, so the legislature is the lead agency for this. So the hearing is conducted in the context of a meeting of the legislature, correct?
So like maybe the April meeting?
Or is it,
No, it has to be a public hearing,
okay,
right? So the legislature can set a public hearing. It doesn't mean that they have to
okay.
be part of their meeting, their official meeting. Typically, that's done, especially at the lower town and planning board meetings, but many times, even at those, if it's a large one, they have it at a special date. And so I don't think that you should try to do that. I think the public would appreciate if as many members of the legislature were there as possible, but it's not going to be a formal meeting of the legislature unless Betsy tells me otherwise. It's not going to be a formal meeting of the legislature in which this is being conducted. It's simply a public hearing that has already been scheduled by this body.
Yes, Chairman.
We have scheduled here on physical today, because this is going here, the 26th, which is a Monday, February.
It's not going to happen. The public hearing should not be in February. It's not enough time.
Good.
Today's is the equipment.
Yes, that is. But the resolution that's on the agenda for today in regard to this, and I'm not sure where this date came from, was February 26th, which would be for physical services next month. So you should
Physical Service is going to look at it this month,
today,
right?
yes.
And then the legislature
And
will
then-
pass the beginning of February. And it doesn't have to have anything to do with physical services next month.
No, it's separate, but it's just before. It's on the same day.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see. As far as the meeting and everything.
It's just like what we're doing
Yeah.
today. We're doing it with a public meeting.
That was just, it was a suggested date in the resolution.
Yeah.
It's the suggested date on the resolution, so I think if we want to change that, we should probably change it here before we send it to
Yeah,
this.
that was why I brought it up.
We do have, March seventh is the legislative session. Otherwise, if you want to do something at the end of March, we do have physical services on March twenty-fifth. And we could do it prior to that meeting as well.
Again, I would suggest you not do it in conjunction with one of your other meetings, but it'd be simply,
So we don't do it at the same time. It would be held before that, just to the extent that we would have legislators here present. That's the
Okay, no,
purpose of that.
understood. So if you had it at like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock on the 7th, you're saying, something like that.
Or prior to the legislative session.
I think though, that was one of the points I was gonna raise, this may take a little more
Yeah.
time than the typical
Yeah,
15
that's
minutes.
exactly what I was
Yeah.
gonna
So
say.
might
So
not
this
line
isn't a
up, yeah.
15-minute.
Yeah, so do you want to do it then?
Well, and the other thing, so 2 points. One is, I know these meetings are generally during working hours. Most of these types of hearings are held in the evening so that people have access, right? So that people who work can participate. So that's just a footnote, right? The other thing is, I will be out of the country the last weekend of February and the first week in March. Unless you guys want to come to Norway with me.
Uh-huh.
Or we have the public hearing.
Me too.
I think typically what happens at these meetings, and others can weigh in because others have experience as well with these types of meetings. But the public hearing is really just to hear comments on it. It's not to sort of make a big presentation, but it's very typical for someone to make a brief presentation to begin with, and I would suggest that that be Delaware. Make a, brief discussion as to what it is, because although that's all in the executive summary and other parts of it, I would say at least 60 to 70% of everyone showing up for a public hearing has never read any of the documents that the public hearing is about. And it's not criticism of the people, it's just, that's the way it is. They have other things in their life to do. So having a presentation to begin with answers a lot of questions that people may otherwise have. Secondly, when things come up during the meeting, there are some things that would take 2 hours to explain, right? And may also need additional documents to demonstrate it. So typically what you do is you don't answer every single question. You answer some questions that are very easily, like, where is this going to be located, right? How many millions of gallons a day is it going to involve? What are the options? So those types of things that can be answered very quickly, it's usually better to answer them then rather than tell people, we're not going to answer any questions until we answer all the questions in our final environmental impact statement. So that's my suggestion, is that that's how you would want to have a presentation, have people there available to answer some simple questions. And then for all the other questions, is your questions being taken down, and we have an obligation to answer every question in the final environmental impact statement, and that's what we'll be doing. So I think it was really a long way of saying, I think we need Mary Beth there and some others
Absolutely.
involved with it from DPW, EFNS, probably law, and as many people from the legislature as can make it would be helpful. I think it's also good for the public to be pointing out that, we'll recognize each of the legislators that are present. So I don't know when you want to schedule that, but not the first week in March.
With that March 25th?
March twenty-fifth, we have the 3:30 physical, we could do it at 5 PM that day.
I suggested 5 PM, and that's obviously very legal to do. What Mary Beth was suggesting is that typically these are held at 7:30 at night, so that people could attend them.
Fine.
Chairman, what do you?
I'm fine with a later start for the public hearing.
We can do it at 7 on physical services, and then people do.
On March 25th.
on March
And is there a time limit that the comments are?
What would normally happen is that there'd be somebody there, sort of emceeing the event, if you will, to make things run smoothly. If looks like there's gonna be a ton of people who want to speak, then typically you put a time limit on it. Usually a maximum of 3 minutes, and usually you wouldn't have less than a minute, but somewhere around 2, 3 minutes, depending upon how many people do so. There's a couple of different options. When you set time limits, although people usually do not like them, it is very unusual for someone to go beyond 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And even controversial projects I've been involved with, when people get 3 minutes and say that they are against this project and they want to speak as much, at the end of 2.5, they're just searching for things to fill out the rest of their 3 minutes.
And European.
Really. Also, people say that it's sort of anti-democratic to put a limit on it, in addition to being allowed under the law. What's really happening is that the people who want to speak for a half an hour, are really imposing upon those people that want to be there and listen to everything. These other people are monopolizing it. So that there's nothing wrong with limiting it to 3 minutes of oral. Now, they can submit 4,000 pages if they want to, that have to be considered just as if they sent them there. So it's not cutting off comments or debate or anything like that. There's only no debate in these things, but no, it's not limiting comments at all, other than verbal comments, which really ensures that people get in the time. Now, let's say you put a reasonable limit of 3 minutes, and there's so many people, I don't think this is going to happen on this particular application, but I've been involved with some where it has happened, where you're going to run out of time because you don't want to go until 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night. That's also not fair to people who just give up and say, I'm not waiting until then, I have things to do, I put my kids to bed or whatever. So typically you set a time frame from 7 to 9, 7 to 9:30 or something like that, with the reasonable limits if there's a lot of people there. You give more leeway if there's like 8 people in the audience. But if you can't complete it on that date, it needs to be then carried over. Now, the trouble with it not being part of a meeting is that you have no way effectively to have it carried over, right? The decision maker, the lead agency, saying, we're gonna have, which is how it normally occurs, because that takes a lot of time to have a meeting. So you can put an alternate date, not an alternate date, like a second date on there when you're approving the date. So it can be March 20, when we was talking about 27th,
25th.
25th, and March 29th or something like that. So pick some other date if needed to continue.
Okay.
I would think you're not going to do that, just given the topic. A lot of people, it's a lot easier for them to rail against the impacts of a large store or a large residential development or an amusement park than it is a large sewer treatment plant. Right? I don't think you're going to have droves of people coming out and commenting, especially when, I mean, some people may say we should stop what we're doing because we don't want any more development. They have a right to say that. Legally, we can, but they have a right to ask that that be done, and we have to listen to that and comment on it. So I would, if you ask me for my suggestion, we should do it, say, on the 25th, 7 o'clock to 9:30. And if needed, to accommodate those wishing to speak and not getting an opportunity during that time, that it could be carried over if not everybody at that meeting. I wouldn't suggest it to be an alternate one, that you have 2 public hearings.
Yeah.
It would just be the one public hearing, but a sort of a default date if in fact you get all the comments in during that first meeting.
Betsy, what, the date, the 25th is a Monday?
Yes, that's, we have physical services that.
So what, would it work if we did the 25th at 7 o'clock and then with a carryover date of the 27th?
Yeah, there's nothing on the calendar for the 27th.
And would we do this, hold this in the chamber?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the chamber's gonna be large enough.
Mhm.
And if I thought that you would have hundreds of people, I would then go over to
EMS.
EMS or maybe even a larger venue, but I really don't think it's going
Okay.
to generate that much.
Right, legislative total.
Thank you. Now, because the resolution is going to be passed by physical services, normally when we have a public hearing, it's whatever committee, that committee chair chairs the public hearing. Is that going to be under this public hearing going to be under physical services or under the sewer advisory committee?
The legislature.
This is
This is just an advisory.
Okay,
The
so,
physical services will not be conducting this hearing.
okay.
It's not their hearing, it's the full
So
legislature.
that leads into my question that I was
That's-
raising my hand about is, so do they need a quorum of the full legislature to open a public hearing?
No.
Yeah, that was my second part. Thank you. That was the second part of my question.
I'll let Betsy weigh in on it. My understanding is that you can set a public hearing on a date that's not a meeting, just setting a public hearing.
But do we need a quorum?
No.
No.
Okay, that wasn't true.
Okay, so let's use those two dates. Eric, do you have something else?
That was it.
Oh, that was,
Laura and I are on the same wave with that right there.
Bob?
I got a couple. One thing that I found is handy at these hearings is if people sign in that they want to speak, so you can call people. And then there would be other people who could speak, but quite often the chair will call on people who signed in first. I don't know if we want to do something like that.
Yeah,
That's generally how we do the
Yeah.
public hearings.
The other is, how about online? Are we gonna have any people that could
So, yeah.
participate online? Is that,
Oh, to the hearing?
yeah,
That's a good question.
I would caution against it. I've seen it done
Yeah.
at various places, and there's always glitches, and then people complain that they relied upon that
Yeah.
in order to appear,
okay.
and now they can't. So I would say, no. If the legislature wants to, they can live stream it so that more people can see it, but not for participation. I would say that we shouldn't have it other than in person.
It'll be consistent with the way we conduct business.
And then I'll also add, so as Rick pointed out, traditionally, we would have a public comment period, which we need to put on the cover of the EIS. Usually we have it start the day after the EIS is adopted, it's complete, ready for public review by the legislature, so in this case, it would presumably be February 2nd. And then we generally have it extend at least 10 days after the date of the hearing. And then the other thing I will say is that the comments that people make orally have no more weight than the comments that people make in writing. And in fact, we encourage everyone to put their comments in writing because, as Rick pointed out, our next step in the process after the public comment period is closed is we have to take all the comments and we have to respond to them. So oral comments, while we may have a transcript, can sometimes be difficult to understand or misconstrued. When people actually have to sit and put things in writing, it's a little more thoughtful and it's easier for us to respond to written comments. All of the written comments actually become, and the transcript of the hearing actually become part of the record of the environmental impact statement. So the other thing that we'll want to do in addition, so we're kind of doing multiple things. We're going to set a comment period. It's going to start usually, in this case, presumably February 2nd and extend to perhaps sometime in early April, given that we're looking at having a hearing at the end of March, to give it that a little bit of time afterwards. We also would like to encourage the county to come up with, and it may be through someone's already established email address, but a place where the public can email comments. And certainly we'll have the physical address where everyone can mail comments, but in this day and age, we find people typically want to email their comments. That's the most efficient way to do it. So we would encourage the county, whether it's a pre-existing email address or one that's created for this purpose, but have a way to email their comments in. Again, that also has a tendency to address the concern about people not having, being disenfranchised, not having the ability to comment because we'll have a very long written comment period. People, and certainly after the hearing, sometimes people think of things that they didn't know that they wanted to discuss until after the hearing. So that extra time frame and that ability to send in written comments in an easy way is also a really good recommended step.
I think we can create, we have the ability to create a specific email address if we need to through IT. We should be able to comment that.
That's kind of nice because then you have them all, they're all time-stamped. You know, when you receive them, you have all of the information, you have the contact information of the person. We found it to be a very, going from EISs in the world of no email to EISs with emails, good.
Okay. Nobody has anything else. I think that, we're ready to move forward and, take a motion to move this physical services, to move the, draft DEIS. And move it to consideration of physical services committee or as acceptable for publication.
So moved.
Second.
Right? Legislative Manelli and Legislative Tortel. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous? Motion carries. Thank you, everybody, and,
Can you just wait for a second? I'm double checking myself here.
sure.
Without looking at it more particular, I think it may be that it has to be conducted under the open meetings law as part of a special meeting of the
It would be a
legislature.
special meeting.
I can't say that for 100%, but it may be that, so we may have to.
Well, you should work that out, yeah, even if you work it out before physical. Because they would be the one that sets it.
25 minutes.
Okay,
In 25 minutes. Well, we could eat up a little time, there's another thing or two on the agenda.
We've got a public hearing in 3:15.
Oh, that's right, we have 3:15, yeah.
11 minutes.
We're down to counting minutes now. There was 3 minutes I was gonna give you, and may only be 2.
I only asked for two. I digress. So, we'll double check that, Rick. and-
yeah, because although generally that's how public hearings are, which is what I was just checking here on some aspects of the law. You can have a lead agency that is not a normal governmental body that has regular meetings. right? So, because if they give a permit, so in essence, the physical services can't be involved agencies, doesn't have any permitting. If it required a permit from DPW could do be involved agency, and therefore they can conduct a public hearing, and they don't have any board meetings, and you have quorum, so.
All
have to
Part
check that.
260 permits, right, under DEC, which is a landfill permit. Those are all those permits, all those hearings are conducted by EDC, by staff. There's no convening of EDC.
The legislature.
Okay, right, because there was one, right, and it would have to be
But
the
the
state
legislature is the lead agency.
It is,
Yeah.
but that's what I have to check.
Okay. So, Betsy, and Rick, you'll, let us know about that, and then if we have to change the date, so maybe we can still, do that later time, or do we have to have that visible today?
We'll get it done by physical services.
Well, it has to be addressed anyway because there was a date in the resolution, so we'll have to either omit that date or add the new date in.
Okay.
Yeah.
With that, let's go to this meeting so they can
With
work.
that,
Or
Make a motion
make
to
a
adjourn?
motion to adjourn.
yes, all in favor, aye.
Thank you all very, very much. You're right, it was my hand for that.
It ain't over yet.
Maybe 2.
I appreciate it, yeah. So the
Your
next meeting
resolution
is
said-
Thursday.
All right,